I call this regular meeting of the Village of Villa Park Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Let's start with roll call. Calvert?
Here.
Hofstra?
Here.
Jackson? Case?
Here.
Lutke?
Here.
Orlowski?
Here.
Romano?
Here.
Schlinsky?
Here.
I had 2 of them present. With that, we have a quorum. I'd just like to start this evening by saying we are being recorded and on video for the first time in a few years. Some folks up here have done it before. Some of you will be new. So when we're speaking in the audience, going to want to make sure have people come up to a microphone. And that's about it. So first item of business will be approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of September 9th, 2021?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any question, comments on the motion?
I have a comment and possibly an amendment. These are the minutes for PZ 21-0006.
Okay.
I'm looking on pages 32 to 33. And while Commissioner Jackson seconded the motion to approve, I do not see his vote categorized or called between pages 32 or 32 to 33. So at this point, I think it'd be proper to make an amendment to. I believe he was a yay vote for the cannabis dispensary approval. I don't know if we can take a look back at anything else. I just don't see his vote on there.
Yeah, I'm looking here. I wonder if it's possible I did not call his name because he was not present when we started.
Okay.
I may have crossed his name off on my list and not called it. I don't recall.
I know he showed up late to the meeting.
I'm going to take the court reporter's word on that his vote was not cast.
Okay. And I'll withdraw any comment to that effect then.
Yeah, but that's gone to the board and been voted on, so. Okay, I appreciate that, though. Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor of the motion to approve?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. First item of business will be public hearing for PZ 21-0008, 257 East North Avenue, Plattev Subdivision to create one lot of record, including utility and drainage easement provisions, CAT Villa Park LLC. The way each item of business will work is we'll start with staff presentation, move to petitioner presentation if they have any, then public comments on any of those items. So if you're wishing to speak from the public on any of the items on the agenda, as each item comes up, that would be your time to speak. They would take questions from the commission, closing comments of the petitioner, then we'll close the public hearing, discuss amongst ourselves as a commission, and then have a motion if it comes to that this evening. So anybody that's expecting to speak on an agenda item this evening, if you could all stand and be sworn in at once, that will save the court reporter some time. And then when you come up to speak, just state your name and address for the record. So if anybody wants to speak this evening, please rise.
Solemnly swear any testimony you will give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
All right, thank you. Okay, so let's start with a staff presentation for 257 to 277 East North Avenue.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay with my mask on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Very
thank
clearly.
you. So the petitioner for this case is requesting a plat of subdivision to be approved to create one lot of record from 3 PIN numbers, 3 parcels. This property is known as 277 East North, but it historically has been known as 257 to 277 East North. This is the property that's currently occupied by Shoot Point Blank. This is a new development that was constructed. One of the conditions of approval of that permit was to consolidate the property to one lot of record and vacate easements as needed for the development. So this property is Zone C3, which is our service business district, and our comprehensive plan does designate this property as corridor mixed use. The item before you tonight is the plat to create one lot of record with the necessary easement. The petitioner is here tonight, owns the property, and is seeking approval of this. Provided this gets approved, it will get forwarded over to the board for final approval and forwarded over to the county for recording. Village staff has reviewed the plat and finds that it meets our standards as provided in the code and recommends approval of the request. To approve a plat of subdivision to create a one lot of record, including utility and drainage easements for the property known as 257 to 277 East North Avenue, PIN numbers 0603-101-005, 0603-101-030, and PIN number 0603-101-029.
All right. Does the petitioner wish to say anything this evening? Okay, yeah, come up and state your name and address for the record, and then,
My name is Brad Kopp. I'm with CAT Villa Park LLC. My address is 1448 East Stoker Court in Loveland, Ohio. I don't have anything really to state, just to thank Consuela and the village staff. It's been a great project for us, and we couldn't, the cooperation from the village and getting the project done has been greatly appreciated. So,
okay,
and I can answer any questions anybody might have.
okay, thank you, we'll get to that in a
Can you
minute.
spell your last name?
COPP.
All right. Are there any public comments on this agenda item? All right, seeing none, we'll move to questions from the commission. Any questions? Just have one quick question for staff. The reason this is before us is because it's a non-residential subdivision, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. There are a few things that trigger that, the need for a subdivision in front of us. I just wanted to make sure everybody's clear on why we don't get a lot of these, so. All right. Any closing comments of the petitioner? Assume no. All right, we'll close the public hearing. Any discussion by commission members? Okay. This is, all right.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. All right, entertain a motion. Anybody wishing to make one?
Make a motion to approve petition PZ 210008 for 257 through 277 East North Avenue to approve a plot a subdivision to create one lot of record, including utility and drainage easement provisions for the property located at 257 to 277 East North Avenue with the pins 06-03-101-005, 06-03-101-030, and 06-03-101-029.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any questions or comments on the motion? None? Roll call vote. Calvert?
Yes.
Hofstra?
Yes.
Case?
Yes.
Ledke?
Yes.
Orlowski?
Yes.
Romano?
Yes.
Schlinsky?
Yes.
And I too vote yes, that our recommendation passes to the village board. They can accept, reject, or modify as they see fit. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next item of business will be PZ 210007 for property 707 North Addison Road, special use assembly and entertainment. Applicant is Diana Hall. Whenever you're ready, Consuelo.
Sure. It's a special use request and a variation request for parking, just to clarify. The petitioner here tonight is requesting a special use for an assembly and entertainment type of use and the variation to the parking requirements. For the space known as 717 North Addison, the space is within a shopping center known as 701 to 707, I'm sorry, to 721 North Addison Road. So the shopping center has multiple tenants, multiple addresses, but the space the petitioner is interested in leasing is known as 717 North Addison. This property is within a C2 neighborhood business district and is surrounded by commercial multi-tenant property. Surrounding zoning districts vary from C1 to the west, south, and to M1 to the north and east, and commercial uses and light industrial uses surrounding the property. The Village Comprehensive Plan designates this area as business district.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Sure. So the surrounding zoning is C1 Convenience Business District to the west and south, M1 Light Industrial to the north and east, and commercial uses and light industrial uses surrounding the subject property. Okay? The petitioner, Diana Hall, is seeking the special use to allow for an assembly and entertainment use and a variation to the parking to operate an event hall that would provide a multiple of special events, private events, such as training classes, private parties, hands-on painting, birthday celebrations, food and toy drives. The petitioner has indicated that the capacity would be up to 50 people in the space. The hours of operation will vary, but generally will be from 10 a.m. till 12 a.m. Monday through Sunday. The Plattev survey indicates the property does include a gravel parking area in the back and parking spaces located in the public right-of-way along Addison Road. The petitioner indicates parking will be available on a first-come, first-served basis in the public right-of-way area, and that patrons will use Uber or Lyft services as other sources of transportation to access the space. The petitioner is not seeking to make any structural modifications to the existing building or the space proposed, and did provide some examples of floor plans for the private events. The parking requirement for this type of use is based on the number of people, and is 0.25 per person. Based on the occupancy of up to 50 people, 13 parking spaces will be provided. The petitioner did provide responses to the special use standards that were forwarded over in your packets, but did not provide responses to the variation standards. Village staff did review the petitioner's request and did comment that a fire sprinkler and fire alarm will be required because of the use of the proposed business. It would be changing it from business to assembly. However, should an architect classify this occupancy as a business, then a fire sprinkler and fire alarm would not be required. Village staff continue reviewing the request and is not supportive of the request because of the lack of parking. Site visits of the property found little to none available parking spaces on the property or in the public street. It is expected that the proposed use will increase the traffic and parking demand in the area. If the Planning and Zoning Commission finds in support of the application, the following motions could be entertained. To recommend approval of the special use for an assembly and entertainment use, and a variation to allow no designated off-street parking spaces for the subject property. Should this request be approved, staff is recommending the following conditions for approval: to obtain permits separately for interior remodel and signage, and compliance with our current building and fire codes.
Okay. Just one point of clarification. You mentioned that you said 13 parking spaces would be provided. I think you mean are required.
Are
And they're-
required.
To clarify, they're providing.
Required.
They're providing no parking, correct?
No off-street
Okay.
parking, no.
Okay. Right. All right. If the petitioner is present and if you have anything to say, you're welcome to come up. If not, state your name and address for the record, please, and then.
Diana Hall, 717 North Addison Road. Just wanted to say that, yes, after hours of the business, the parking spaces are open because all the other business on the premises are closed. So from the hours of 5:30 until there's more parking spaces available on that area of the strip mall. So just to put that out there.
Okay. I appreciate that. Any other comments you want to make before we move ahead? I mean, if we have questions, we'll definitely come
Yeah,
back to you.
that's
so-
it for now.
So you'll have another chance to
Okay.
speak for sure. Thank you. All right, any public comments on this agenda item? Anybody wishing to speak? All right, seeing no one, we'll move to questions from the commission. Anybody have any questions for the applicant or for staff?
Consuelo, could you explain the sprinkler requirements one more time, please?
Because it's going from a business, retail, office space to an assembly type of use, it kicks in building and fire codes because the space has not been utilized as that. And the assembly type of use allows for an additional level of people, and the space needs to comply with the current and building fire codes. The fire sprinkler is one of them to allow for safe use of that space for the number of people that's expected.
But what did you say, if they find it to be a business?
Yeah, so the architect, so for this space to be the proposed assembly type of use, we'll need some architectural plans. And if the architect feels that it does not require that, then we would defer to the architectural analysis of the space and the use, depending on what the specifics are. But from what we could see, that's our determination that this would require fire alarm and sprinklers for the type of use.
I have a quick question. What is the square footage of this space being occupied?
As noted, 750 square feet.
Okay, I wasn't sure from the report if that was
Yes.
just the space. Okay, so the entire, that's the space that the applicant will be leasing, not the entire building?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Consuelo, based upon the square footage of the unit itself within the strip, are there different occupancy allowances based upon the different type of business that would be a possibility for that space?
Yes, so the occupancy, from a fire code perspective, does vary. And depending on the type of use that it is, the occupancy is going to be based on that. So for example, a 750 square foot retail business could have up to 25 occupants. And that's 30 square feet per person. A repair shop, for example, in a 750 square foot space could be allowed to have up to 7 occupants, which is 100 square feet per person in that space. So it does vary depending on the type of use that's within the space.
Do we have any standards for the assembly style? I don't want to call it a business because I think that might refer to, or might entail and reference more retail type businesses. But for the assembly use, are there occupancy standards for a space with 750 square feet?
Yeah, there are. And based on the up to 50 people that's being proposed for the 750 square foot space, that's what's triggering the fire alarm and the fire sprinkler to kick in. So there are definitely, so that could go up and down depending obviously on the number of people that you're proposing for the space.
Okay, so let me ask that a different way then. Is it allowable for an assembly, is 50 people, is an occupancy of 50 people allowable under our current fire and zoning codes and building codes for an assembly use occupancy?
It is, as long as it's fire sprinklered and a fire alarm is provided.
Okay, and if the petitioner supplied an architect's recommendation or authority indicating that he or she would find it to be more akin to a business and not an assembly use, would the architect's finding that is a business trigger business occupancy standards versus assembly occupancy standards? Meaning, I think you referenced 25 people for a business, for retail, would be the occupancy maximum. So would that cause an issue with the architecture recommendation or consideration of a business trigger anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we would defer to the architectural analysis of the proposed use. I don't know that 25 occupants would comply with what the petitioner is looking to do in the space. So that would be a good question for her to respond to if that number could be limited based on the application and the type of events I'm not familiar that 25 would be something that she's open to.
So regarding the fire sprinkler and fire alarm issue at hand here, this is a tenant space within a larger sort of building.
Yes.
So by right, I mean, you can't sprinkle just a single space, right? I mean, how do you, is that going to happen? I mean, are you going to have a conversation with the building owner to sort of serve the entire building, right? I mean, that would sort of be.
That would be the ideal scenario, but you could certainly just sprinkle a specific
Yeah.
space. That's not out of the question, but ideally,
Yeah.
it would be the entire building. And typically that's what you see, especially for new construction. It's easier to retrofit some of these spaces to something other than what it originally was constructed, but
Right.
Is this parking on Addison, is this considered public parking, or is it belong to the different businesses?
it's public
It's
parking.
public
It's right
parking.
away.
Okay.
And the parking in the rear, or the gravel area in the rear, does not, that's not, I'm sure people park there, but it doesn't meet the requirements of parking spaces per our code, correct?
It does not for the building. And the applicant could go into the lack of use of those parking spaces. My understanding is those spaces are not intended to accommodate the proposed business.
Okay.
So technically, none of the businesses, because that is public parking, none of the businesses in this same attached strip mall have.
I wouldn't be able to tell you if any of those businesses have designated parking spaces without having that information provided to us. Because the property does have rear, parking spaces in the rear. It's a gravel area that's non-conforming, but that is on private property. Commissioner Case, I believe you have a question, if you
Is there
may.
a square footage on sprinkler and fire for a build-out?
It's based on the type of use, and also obviously the occupancy kicks in. So we would defer to the building code and the fire requirements based on the specifics of the use. For an assembly type of use, the 50 is going to kick in that requirement to have the space sprinklered and an alarm provided.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that comment came from the fire department directly.
But who's talking?
I am sorry.
Sorry, I'm lucky. Can you please start over?
Yeah, I just said, just to be clear, that comment came from the fire department, and not village staff. So they've reviewed that and made that determination.
I've got a question for actually more of a point of clarification. In the commission memo, page 3 under the requested action, towards the bottom, it currently lists for the property located at, and I believe that's the full strip of 707 through 721, whereas petitioner is asking specifically for the unit at 717. So the way that the recommended action is currently drafted, if we were to obtain a motion and pass such for the requested action, would the special use for assembly and entertainment and then the variation for parking not merely apply only to unit 717, but for the entire strip?
We could definitely make that modification to the motion, so it's specific to the 717 space. I know that was a question that was not very clear when the application came in, until we received thereafter more details on what uses were in the building, what space she wanted to go in. So 717 is the space that she's interested in. She has clarified that. So that's something that I do recommend you modifying your motion, so it's specific to the space known as 717 with that is.
Any other questions? For staff or for the petitioner?
If I could ask a question to the petitioner.
Yeah. If you could just come up to the mic and answer because we're being videotaped this evening. Thank you.
Evening. Thank you for coming today.
No problem.
Given the comments based upon the issues, potential issues of occupancy and the sprinkler system, would potentially another month give you an adequate amount of time to run these concerns by the owner / landlord to be able to supplement your petition to get back to us as to, you know, any conversations or proposals from an architect as to the conditions for a sprinkler system or possibly reducing the occupancy to avoid any other potential conditions for your space?
That would be fine, and we already discussed as well to lower it if need be, so we were okay with that.
Okay. Would that extra month possibly also give you time to discuss the parking plans, parking requirements with the other business owners in that area to maybe attempt to find business-to-business accommodations for your business
I
proposal?
think that would be a sufficient amount of time. That should be okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I just want to make a point, if I may, just for clarification. So the motion could be to recommend for it to be continued or to proceed with the recommendation that gets forwarded to the village board. I believe you're already leasing the space, so I just keep that in mind. I just want to make sure you understand what, okay.
All right. So,
So you're already leasing the space, is that,
Yes, I am.
okay, thank you.
But not operating the business.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, when I got the space, you want to come up there?
Sure.
So when I got the space and I went over the application and everything with the owner, they had already got approval, and I explained what I was coming in there for, because I already have a business at 707, which is a hair salon. So we're only like a couple doors down.
Okay.
So I got the okay first before I did that. So it was already like, hey, that'd be a great idea, you know, because I am into cosmetology, and my main focus was to initially to have that as a one-on-one location to do classes for hair. But then my other thoughts came to that as my other business into one versus having all these different separate locations. So that's initially what I wanted to do.
Right.
So your hair salon is in the same building?
It's
Is
on
this
the,
same strip mall?
yes, it is.
Which one is that?
707.
7 zeros.
It's all about the right. That's the address. Might be a little picture.
Could I just ask you to clarify your comment on something had already been approved when you were talking to the landlord?
Yes, they said that what I wanted to do as far as the classes and do this, well, we didn't know that it was a special use. We just knew that it was an existing place already, and I was just gonna, you know, come and start the second location for connection to the hair salon. So I was told that that was okay to do the business. So at that point, then I signed the lease. Then further down the road is when we stumbled across that we need an actual special use. So I wasn't aware of that. So that's it. Okay. Anything else?
So, just for clarification, so it's a meeting space, but there's no catering or cooking or anything? I mean, they might bring food in,
There will bring food in.
but you are not
Correct.
cooking on premises?
No, I am not.
and what about alcohol?
Alcohol, that's not in the plan as of now, no. No alcohol.
All right, so if you want to add anything, I'm going to move to discussion among the, well, it sounds like we may be continuing this to give you some more time to get things together, but is there anything you want to add before?
I don't have anything else to add.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
thank you.
Yep, thank you. All right, discussion by commission members. So one thing that I would like to point out that staff also pointed out in the report is that when an applicant comes seeking a special use or variation, we're supposed to judge that application based on standards that are specific to a special use and standards that are specific to a variation. That's what we're supposed to base our votes on. And currently, the application, in terms of the special use itself, is, it's the applicant's burden to provide evidence. In their responses to the special use, they've provided essentially no evidence. I understand it's complicated. On the variations, there were no responses. I don't know if that was something that wasn't provided to the applicant or the applicant didn't fill out. If we continue this, I would like to see you work with staff or hire an outside source, an attorney, to help flesh out those answers with some evidence, because there is ample concern from staff regarding parking. I think that's the primary concern here. The fire code issue, that's not really our purview. That's going to be for the fire department and building department. So that's what if we continue this, that's where I would like to see your focus on providing evidence that your parking situation will not create a situation that's worse than it's already there. I know just from driving around there that during the day, which is probably not your prime time, but during the day, the residential streets and the streets south of you that runs east-west, those streets get parked pretty heavily by the uses that are already around there that didn't have enough parking to start with. So that's what I would like to see you focus on. Consuela, can you make sure she gets a copy of your report and the applications, if she hasn't already? I don't know what's been supplied. And to the degree that you can, that we have responses to those standards.
Sure, and I could definitely do that. She already has a copy of the report, but I could definitely provide another set of the standards that was part of the packet.
Okay. Any other specific guidance or comments that we would like to offer the applicant?
I'd like to just throw out, regardless of the answers, I mean, the topic before us on parking, rather than string an applicant along for another month, if we're going to come back on parking, be like, sorry, I don't have enough parking. Like look at the building, best guess from Google Maps here, it looks like there's about 10 spots in front of that. I understand it's all public parking, but there's about 10 in front of that. So also what I'm considering is, that 13 parking spot number that was thrown out there is based off the maximum occupancy of 50, which doesn't necessarily mean that's what they need every time. So, I think we need to figure out if the parking is going to be the hang up, let's not string the applicant along on redesigns and hiring lawyers. How do we lean on parking? Because it is all public there, and all of those businesses for customers are dependent upon that anyway. So, there's no business with a parking lot other than the little gravel lot in back. So, what are thoughts on the parking issue specifically? I'd just like to kind of get a consensus on that.
Well, I'd like to have a better rundown of the uses currently in the building. I mean, we've got that here, but how many employees? I mean, what is the parking situation really like? As anybody who's been up here when we were talking about businesses on Villa Avenue, I think large portions of our village are either overparked or just right parked. This may not be one of them, though.
On the way over here tonight, I'm the one talking. On the way over here tonight, there was 6 open. 6
Yeah.
parking spots.
And then I guess my concern would be that it's not a hair salon with 6 chairs, or
Right.
an auto repair shop with a half dozen employees and 2 or 3 customers there at a time, who they may also be parking cars in those spots that they're not supposed to. But we're talking about 50, potentially 50 uses, 50 users of the space. And, yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's potential to continue, but if people think that there's not enough parking or that it's
Right.
fine, then we can vote.
Well, that's,
I mean, that's why, I mean,
I will add to that, the applicant said that, primary business will be done after other business hours, so that may open them up. But that being said, your hours are going to be, I saw it somewhere, 10 a.m. to midnight, right? So you're open during those hours too.
right,
So that's something to just consider.
yeah. Did you,
What's the gravel lot back? Who owns that?
that's what's unclear. It's part of the building, but nobody presented like who those parking spaces belong to.
like an
Are
alley.
right, but are
It's like an
they,
alley.
You're not going to fit it. Yeah.
but I guess my question would be, what we don't know is, there could be an applicant, I mean, there could be a tenant in that building who has in their lease that that's their parking area. I would, before we say that that's okay for them to park, we kind of need some evidence that it is. That's a problem with multi-use buildings that are underparked.
How many spots ballpark would be back there? Anybody know?
It's hard
It
to,
looked like maybe 6 or 8. I mean,
Small.
it's
Yeah.
like gravel parking area that's not very deep between dumpsters, basically, with doors off the back of the building. And
It may be a loading zone. I mean, we don't really know. I guess the petitioner might know. I mean, that back spot, is that where all the loading doors are to the businesses?
There's only one business at 707 behind me, that is a loading zone. So, just that one, not the rest of it.
Is there access to your building from the back?
There is access from the back to the building.
And 717
Yes.
as well?
Question, were you aware of the potential for fire sprinklers and fire alarm based on sort of the conversation with staff?
I was not aware of any sprinkler system that I needed. So since I had the hair salon, none of the businesses on the whole entire strip had sprinkler systems at all.
Correct.
So they always told me that the sprinkler system was not required for any of the businesses.
And so the issue from staff's analysis on the front end here during this is that the switch to an assembly use puts you into a different category. We're changing the use of the space, which then sort of triggers that requirement.
Okay.
I mean, there seems like it would be a sort of, if you're going to do that to get 50, yeah, that's a problem, right? From the
Start, yeah.
from the code standpoint. Going back to the landlord, because the landlord could just say, I'm not putting a fire sprinkler in.
Exactly.
Then it becomes a different analysis as she's referring to relative to the architect saying, okay, well, we're only going to be looking at this as continuing a business use. Is that how you're,
yeah, we would defer to the architectural analysis of the space based
Right.
on what it is proposed.
yeah.
So
I mean, because those types of buildings are not designated as mixed-use assemblies, right? I mean, it's always a single usage and
In each
in
space.
terms of how the code looks at it.
Okay.
Consuelo, was there any indication as to, I mean, if her request was for up to 50 people as an event, that drove the sprinklers? If it was 25, would it still drive the need for sprinklers and so forth?
That might change the requirement from a fire code standpoint. The occupancy definitely is gonna dictate what, from a code standpoint, the space has to comply with.
And the parking standpoint.
Yeah, see,
And the
my,
parking as well, correct.
it's the 50 that drives me to have heartburn over the parking. Okay, because saying that people are gonna come by Uber and Lyft and that,
You
that-
can't count on
you
that.
can't count on that.
Okay.
I mean, you really, that's,
Now, if there was a number that I knew of the.
no, I know you probably
Okay.
don't. That's something the fire department would
Okay,
have to
yeah,
tell
because
us.
if I knew of one like 40 or 35, then I can rotate those hours and those people's around those time frames.
Well, but then you're dividing, if it's 40, you only need 10 spaces.
Okay.
Okay, and now if we're gonna operate it after 5:30, from 5:30 to midnight or 5 to midnight, most of the other businesses are probably closed. I mean, it looks like it's an auto repair place and a print shop and that.
Yes.
Those are probably really ramping down.
Yeah, they're closed at 5:30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's what would influence my approval towards parking, but
Okay.
with 50 people, all we're gonna do is park in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, yeah, my concern at 50 as well is that, I mean, 50 requires 13 parking spaces, but for an assembly use, that's basically 4 people per car.
Yeah.
I mean,
says
that's-
everybody- Yeah,
It's very conservative.
that don't happen.
That's not really the way the use would probably operate. I know it's what our code is, and that's all that she would be required to provide, so I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But,
The reality.
yeah.
By no means do I want to string the petitioner along with regards to the parking, but I just think at this juncture, I'm not in a position to say yes. I think if we gave you another month and you came back with additional and supplemental information, and possibly talked with your landlord and possibly an architect and revisited the total number of people that you're seeking to occupy at once, meaning your occupancy maximum, I would hope that at I think it's the December 9th meeting, we would have a more fleshed out application to possibly relook at the parking situation.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I'd agree with that. As it stands right now, a variance for 13 parking spots is a lot.
Yeah,
in that area.
and for me personally, I've got 2 issues. I've got, well, 3. I've some concerns about the 13 parking spaces. That's a big variation, when there might not even be 13 parking spaces on the property. I have issues with the fact that, staff has the same concerns. And they're more familiar with this area than I am. And then, I don't think I could vote on it just based on the completeness of the application. And this is not, these things are kind of complicated, and so I understand that, completing the application is not something you do on a daily basis, and that's why it's usually in your best interest to find somebody to help that has the knowledge, and because this is an application that I feel realistically staff could have said wasn't complete enough to come to us at all. That would have been a possibility, and we might not be talking about it at all, or she might have fleshed it out and it'd be before us in another month or 2. But I would lean towards giving the applicant another month to put together a more complete application, to talk to the landlord. I don't want to string anyone on, but I couldn't vote on this application in favor of it at the moment. Yes?
Are we to help direct the landlord, like, for extra parking in the back? Which I don't know if she would know that. Are we supposed to tell her, give her some questions to ask the landlord? Just to help her?
If you think there are ways that you can help her, yeah, definitely. Or, alternately, you could provide things to staff to provide to her. That might be the most concise, but if you want it on the record here, we certainly could, because
One other quick question, would that have to be a paved lot in back for them to park? Or are they able to park on gravel?
If it's legally non-conforming, then they could park on it, correct?
Correct.
As
and
long
that-
as they're not altering it, that would trigger needing to pave it and stuff, but yes, they could continue to park there as is. If they were adding to the building or something like that, I mean, I think in that case, I would want to condition something for it to be repaved, but that's not what's being proposed here. This is the continued use of an existing building that's been there longer than most of us have been alive.
Like,
But that's not actually what's happening. It's a special use to change the.
Right, no, that's what I'm saying,
Yeah,
right.
but if we're question for you, Consuelo. If this is a business that comes into this spot and is a business unit, are we even having this conversation? Is this even a proposal that comes through? If this is just a new business that's filling into a retail slot?
If it's a retail business, taking up an existing retail, no, this would not be before you tonight.
Right.
It's the fact that it's a change of use for that space.
That's
which
what's triggering
triggers
all of this.
the special use and the parking variation.
And that's why when she has the conversation with the landlord on the front end, yeah, we don't need sprinklers. Yeah, you don't, you know, there's sort of that feedback at least coming from them because of the understanding of
Unfortunately for the
use.
the tenants, that happens a lot to applicants.
Sure, yes.
They leased that used car lot, that was the used car lot a year and a half ago, to find out the special use is no longer valid. And then they've got to come before us, unfortunately.
Consuelo, did anybody look at, I see none of those spaces in front being a handicap spot. As we go to an event type of thing, does any of the ADA stuff kick in?
Yeah, I mean, definitely ADA applies to private lots for new construction. On public right-of-way, if there are existing spaces, we would have to defer to what the state requirement for that would be. I believe the state will fall back on local ordinances that govern the use of the public parking spaces. But it's not uncommon for public parking spaces, existing especially, not to have designated handicap spaces.
Yeah, but that's a public parking, that's not private
Yeah,
parking
I
lot.
understand.
Yeah.
I don't know if the use would kick it in.
So what I would recommend is, I would say first, figure out whether you're gonna need sprinklers or not. And then, some kind of a parking plan on paper as far as front and back ratio.
Yeah,
Because if you're not gonna be able to do it unless there's sprinklers, I don't see the building owner putting in a sprinkler system.
yeah, I would agree that the sprinkler is probably the first factor, because if the cost of that, first of all, the landlord obviously is going to have to agree to do that if that's deemed to be necessary, and then you are going to have to determine if that cost, because either you're going to have to pay for it, or the landlord's going to pass it on to you one way or the other. You have to decide if that cost is there. That is not something that's not in our control. Unfortunately, we're just here for the special use and the variation, but that would probably be the first thing to sort out. Would you agree, Consuelo?
I would agree. That's one of the things I would
That
do.
seems like the biggest factor for you. Because I mean, the use itself, I don't have a problem with. It's the potential number of users and the availability of parking in that particular neighborhood. Because I do know that, like, late in the day at least, the residential streets and stuff in that area are already fairly heavily parked, frequently with business trucks, which probably shouldn't be parked there anyway, but. All right, so.
Got somebody.
Yeah, real quick, go ahead. You're gonna need to come up and state your name and address for the record, because we're being, we've got a court reporter.
Tom Kieft. I own the building at 720 Iowa, which is behind that, 720, 722, 724. I don't know about her specific on Addison Road, those parking spots, because I don't really see those during the day, but the area behind those buildings onto Iowa and Stone is nothing short of disastrous during the day. Every parking spot is jammed with unlicensed vehicles. All the body shops are using all the village spots to drop off cars that are in need of repair, and they sometimes park there for several hours and sometimes several days. I've had some in front of my building for several weeks and over a month. I constantly call the police and have different, to see if they can be ticketed. But that whole area along there, I have tenants and myself. Normally, if I don't show up or any time in the day, there's not even a place to park in front of my building because all the spots are full, so my tenants are scrambling to find a place for them to park their places. So the whole area is, got multiple concerns and very overcrowded, especially with cars that probably shouldn't even be there. The shops are utilizing the village right-of-ways for parking, body shop cars, basically. And it seems as more and more body shops have moved into the neighborhood in the last year or two, the parking situation has gotten much, much worse. So I don't know how this may apply to Addison Road, that parking in front of all those buildings and where her building is, because I don't park over there, but I know behind the buildings and in the area behind it, it's a complete mess.
Yeah, I really appreciate those comments, and that's kind of one of my concerns too, is that thank you. Because like you said, that there are probably cars parked there that should not be parked there. And I would guess that it's probably the same, at least during some portion of the day, where the public parking in the front is probably being used by the auto repair place that's there to park cars for their customers, or they're waiting for repairs and stuff. All right, so anybody else have any other comments, advice they would like to offer the applicant before we make a motion? Yeah, please.
One last one. So when you go in your space, I don't know, since it's an older building, there's probably not even an ADA bathroom in there.
Can you repeat that for me?
Your bathroom situation. So I don't know if you'd have to update to an ADA bathroom. You would have that. You have sprinkler systems. I mean, you got a lot of questions to ask your landlord.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before you get really
Into it.
Yeah, ADA, like the American with Disabilities Act, whether the bathroom is handicap accessible, essentially. I don't know if that would be triggered here, because, yeah.
Change of use, it would.
And, yeah, I know you've signed a lease, but it does sound like you have a lot of questions for the landlord as well as for us. And the fact that you have a business there, how long has your business been there?
Since January.
Okay. Because to me, that's a good thing. That's something in your favor, that you're already a tenant there, and you're less likely to be disruptive to other tenants because you are one of the other tenants. So I really want to give you a chance to get this together. I can't support it as it is right now, though. So, all right. Unless there are any other comments, I think we would be looking for probably a motion to continue.
Yeah,
Who would like to make that motion?
I'd like to make a motion to continue. Let's see. PZ 21-0007 until December 9th.
All right, there's a motion to continue to a date certain of December 9th, 2021. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second here. Any questions or comments on the motion? Roll call vote. Calvert,
Yes.
Hofstra,
Yes.
Case,
Yes.
Budke,
Yes.
Orlowski,
Yes.
Romano,
Yes.
Schlinsky.
Yes.
I too vote yes. So the motion, so we will continue to the next public hearing. I'll give you a month, probably closer to 3 weeks to get stuff back to Consuelo to provide to us. I'm gonna ask Consuelo to work with you to the extent that she can on her time schedule, to make sure that you kind of understand the ins and outs of the application. They're not easy, especially if you're doing it yourself. And then, this will not be noticed again, so you will need to be here for that, and, this is the only notice of that date, so, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so the next item of business is PZ 210009, text amendments to Article 2, Section 2.3, 2.6, 2.65, Village of Villa Park petitioner. Consuelo, when you're ready.
Thank you. This item is part of the overall zoning code amendments that were that you reviewed earlier this year, that were forwarded to the village board. The village board kicked it back, and we're noticing items on individual section, again, and before you. So, the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'll give a brief overview of what the request is and then the history of this. But this memo is specifically, this request is specific to Article 2, which covers sections 2.3, 2.6, and 2.6.5, changes to the sections. And this is one part of the overall zoning recommendations that we proposed previously this year. I'll take it one section at a time. The proposed changes to section 2.3 are in reference to the overall site coverage, to be consistent with section 7.8.7.b of the village code. And it is also proposing to update the maximum lot coverage percentages allowed in residential districts to 50% for RS-10 and the RM-9 zoning districts. And these are bigger lots, and also proposing to increase the impervious surface to 60% allowed for RS-7.5 and the RD 7.5 districts, which have the smaller lots, typically around 7,500 square feet. The percentages that staff is recommending to include in this section to change would be consistent with lot coverage provisions that are found in Article 7, which is the parking and section of the zoning code, which do indicate that on lots of less than 7,500 square feet in area, the total of impervious surfaces on those lots, including driveways, may not exceed 56%. So on other lots, the maximum impervious surfaces permitted is up to 50%. So the table that's included in your staff memo highlights the changes in red. Again, this is looking at the parking section of the zoning ordinance and consistent with what standards are for maximum lot coverage. So we are proposing to change that so that it's more clear to the public and to be consistent with, like I said, generally what has been allowed in the community and in surrounding communities for similar lots, residential lots. Other changes proposed for this article is making a reference to the permitted obstructions table. So under 2.6.5, in red, we're proposing to add a reference to the permitted obstructions that are found in section 14.1.9, table 13-7. This is so that if someone's looking at the residential code, we do make references to other sections of the code, so they would find a reference to the permitted obstructions in this list of where other references they could refer to. Some background information regarding the zoning code updates. Back in February 11th of this year, of 2021, the Planning and Zoning Commission had a public hearing where overall multiple zoning text amendments were proposed to the zoning code. The Planning and Zoning Commission made a motion to continue for additional information. Between the months of February and March of 2021, me, the Director of Community Development, did follow up perform additional research, looked at comparable communities, including those closest to us that are comparable, such as Addison, Carroll Stream, and Lombard. And I provided an updated memo to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We reissued a public notice in the Daily Herald for various text amendments, and that was in March of this year. It went back to the Planning and Zoning Commission on the 8th of April, where the Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the text amendments. And that included the use of shipping containers for a temporary and permanent basis for non-residential property. On May 24 of this year, 2021, the village board meeting tabled the zoning code updates indefinitely. And on June the 28th, 2021, the village board removed the item from the table. No action was taken, however, it was decided the item would go back to the village board on July 12th for further consideration. On July 8th, I provided an updated memo regarding zoning text amendments for discussion at the July 9th, 2021 meeting. On July 9th, a follow-up meeting with approximately several members from the village board and staff that included the Director of Community Development, myself, the Director of Economic Development, Patrick Burke, the former village president, Al Boltheis, Planning and Zoning Commissioner Larry Calver, Planning and Zoning Commissioner Mike Orlowski, Trustee Kozer, and Trustee Kumar participated in that meeting. It was discussion on the proposed changes to the zoning code and the revised memo and background on the changes. On July 9th of 2021, around 3:30 p.m., the Director of Community Development, myself, provided an updated memo addressing comments received at the follow-up meeting listed above in that list in the staff report. Shortly after that, the village manager provided an updated memo to all of the village board of trustees. On July the 12th of 2021, at the village board meeting, a motion to approve the item did not pass. The item was voted down via a 3-4 vote. On August 23 of 2021, at the village board meeting, Trustee Kozer asked about the status of the ordinance changes, and President Cozone and Attorney Ord clarified that the zoning ordinance changes did not have to go back to planning and zoning and could go back to the village board for consideration. However, September 13 of 2021 board meeting, an ordinance amending the proposed changes for specifically shipping containers was on the agenda, and that was tabled to October 11th. October 11th, the village board did vote and approve those changes to the shipping container. So, long story short, the items are being split and a public notice is being issued again, very specific to what chapter, what section of the code is being changed, and we're taking one item at a time before the Planning and Zoning Commission instead of lumping all of those changes, so that's easier to understand. So the item before you tonight has to do with Article 2, Section 2.3, Table 2-3, regarding the lot and building regulations, regarding lot coverage, impervious surface, maximum percentages allowed, and building regulations as provided in the memo before you tonight. The changes are crossed out and shown in red. And to Article 2, Section 2.6, regarding the reference to the permitted obstructions. This is a recommendation that gets forwarded over to you to make a recommendation that would get forwarded over to the village board.
All right, thank you. All right. Any public comments on this agenda item? All right, seeing none, we will move to questions from the commission. Just point of clarification, there are currently no changes proposed to this beyond what we discussed at the previous hearing, right?
Correct. What's before you tonight and thereafter will be specifically what the commission has already made a recommendation on.
All right, and there were no comments or changes to this particular section received by staff from anyone? From the village board or from
So we did receive additional changes to zoning ordinance that are being requested, but the items before you tonight and thereafter are going to be just breaking up the zoning code updates that you've already made a recommendation.
Yes.
And then we could definitely revisit any other changes. It's within your purview to, if you want to look at some of the other changes that have not been discussed, but we would have to notice those changes.
Okay, but well, I guess my point is none of those changes were, there have been no changes proposed by anyone to this particular
Correct.
section. I'm going to need you to be sworn in and state your name and address for the record, please.
You solemnly swear testimony you're about to give before my cause the truth and whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes, and if you could come up here, please, because we are on video.
So maybe Trustee Corkery can kind of help me remember on this. My understanding on the October meeting was that certain proposed changes to 6.11.2 were coming back to planning and zoning and going to be discussed with planning and zoning. And President Kazona shaking his head and affirming that as well. That's what I thought we were going to have on the meeting here tonight. Now we're jumping ahead.
We're not
So-
jumping ahead or jumping back at any point.
Well, but
What's before
you were at that meeting. Do you not recall that there was a consensus on the board that we would vote on the current proposed shipping container 6.11 just to have something in play? And then all the suggested changes from the board would then be handed down to planning and zoning, and then a public hearing and discussion would be made of that, and then it would be brought back to the board. Was that not your understanding, and was that not your understanding? So here we are. That hasn't happened.
So
Please
what?
state your name.
Jack Kozar, K-O-Z-A-R.
So the directive, and this is provided in a weekly memo to the board and on a weekly basis to the village manager, and here, you know, obviously before you here, we do notice our changes. So the item here tonight is specifically just this section, this chapter that the Planning and Zoning Commission has previously recommended approval for. Any changes, new changes, would have to go before the commission, and we would have to notify those. And that was not the plan for tonight's meeting.
So why was it changed from what the directive and understanding from the board was? The board is the voting body. Why was that direction changed and not carried through?
So the directive in the meetings, and my understanding of the meetings that we've had, and we had meetings to clarify what the moving forward.
I'm
was.
only talking about the October meeting with the board. Do you recall that meeting?
There's been lots of meetings, Trustee Kozart, and my intent is just to break it up to what the Planning and Zoning Commission made positive recommendations, that the village board did not want to review it comprehensively based on what has already been reviewed and recommended approval.
Which
So
was
that's-
611.2, which they didn't want to have in a meeting and go into a long conversation, a long dialogue at the board meeting about 6.11.2.
So it's within your purview to make comments on what you feel the commission should do regarding this item.
But I don't think
And
the
we can
commission
move
has
forward
that
with that?
information.
Yeah, so what I'm going to say, this is the agenda that was put before us as a commission. We have in the memo, there is a timeline, I believe,
It's page 4 or 5.
of when things were expected to be heard. Looking at the memo, right, yeah, no, that's, right. So it looks like they're essentially in numerical order, going through the code in order. And there's a preliminary timeline here, which essentially has us talking about one of these issues every month. I'm going to assume the last March 12th is a typo and it's probably supposed to be May 12th. So, based on what's on our agenda, this is the public hearing that we're holding this evening.
What's on your timeline for November?
November is lot coverage. It looks like,
What we're looking
What we're looking at.
What we're looking at
oh
right
yeah,
now.
yeah. Lot coverage, Article 2, residential district, section 2.3.
Because we don't have that. There's
Yeah, it's, I
no
mean,
way to
it's
see
the,
that. And
me-
there was an earlier timeline
the,
that
I
stated
believe
shipping
that, I
containers.
could be wrong, I believe, is,
If I may, this is the same timeline that we provide in the weekly to the board, in the packet that goes out to the board, the confidential packet.
I'll bring it to the next board meeting and I'll show you what I have that says shipping containers for tonight. So somewhere along the line that got changed.
yeah,
Yeah, we
I,
could definitely look at
We're
that
showing
and
shipping
review
containers is
that.
approved.
yeah, they are. So we need to be careful about the crosstalk because we do have a court reporter who's trying to follow all of this. I'm not looking at her, but I can see her eyes rolling back in her head probably.
Chairman Jarrett, I believe President Calzone has something to say.
Yes,
Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give before knowing cause of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I am President Kazone, 21 West Adams, Villa Park. It was my understanding at the October 11th board meeting, we had discussed the storage containers, and there was a lot of discussion that was brought up. There were, I think it was like 11 or 12 items that had been brought up, changes that the board had requested to be made to the shipping container ordinance. It was decided at that point that because the changes were so different from what the Planning and Zoning Commission had recommended, that those changes should have been at tonight's meeting, and then that would be open for public discussion, because the concern was if the board made such drastic changes that there was no public comment on those changes that were to be made. So the commission was supposed to get those 11 or 12 changes that would have been discussed in open discussion with the public. And then, planning and zoning could make their decision whether or not they agreed with the board or they wanted to keep their own, but at least then it was out for the public. And then that was going, after the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting tonight, the next board meeting would be brought there for the vote by the board. But it was strictly going to be the shipping container section, which I believe is 6.11.2 or something like that.
yeah.
So that's what the board thought was going to be part of the agenda tonight here at P&Z.
Yeah, and I do understand that confusion. Our agenda comes to us from staff, which I assume comes from the village board and/or village manager. As far as the petitions, like, we actually cannot put a
Sure.
text amendment on the agenda. Only the village board or can do that. So there's clearly some confusion here. And so I guess one question I would have is, I know we also have to be careful because we have 3 trustees here. And there's no discussion between them at the moment, but we want to avoid that. It looks like we're trying to incorporate any possible changes into all these and send these back to you. It seems that the shipping containers should be at the top of that list. It can't be tonight.
Correct.
The agenda's published and we're here. We can make a point to have it on the agenda for next month. For sure. And then I guess
I understand that. I just wanted to clarify exactly what the board thought was going to be on tonight.
yeah, I understand that.
And I understand, there are 3 trustees here. It's my understanding that as long as only 2 trustees speak, then we're okay with the Open Meetings Act.
Okay.
But good, again, we didn't want to, do any violation of that, and then also not step on your guys' toes too, but
Yeah, no,
But again, that was my understanding of what tonight's meeting, what was going to be on there.
yeah, and I understand that. So this has obviously been a very, there's a lot of sausage being made. That's, I guess, is the way to put it on these, for closing in on coming up on a year now almost. And so I think staff's primary concern, I don't want to say primary concern, but a concern is getting the stuff that we need to hold public hearings on each of these so they can go to you for comment, correct? To the village board, I mean, for a vote. But if there are going to be comments on them from the trustees,
I guess get it on for the next,
yeah, no,
next meeting.
I don't have a problem, discussing that. That would have to be noticed as new proposals, right? And you need to review those.
Yeah, if I could make a suggestion.
Yes, please.
I would suggest that we will make the shipping containers the next item, so we could postpone this, or however, not take a motion on these changes, if you'd like, or you can make a motion, however you feel comfortable. But what is before you tonight is something that you already had reviewed and made a recommendation. But the priority here is just the shipping containers discussion, the changes to that, new new changes that the Planning and Zoning Commission had not voted on before. So my suggestion is we'll go ahead and go to public notice for those, for changes to that section, and take that to the December meeting, Planning and Zoning Commission
So,
meeting.
yeah, I've been thinking about these quite a bit, as you can probably imagine, more than any person should. I'm kind of weird that way. But I know that there's a lot of input from various trustees, some of whom are here, some of whom aren't, on all of these. And they're trying to grapple with what feels like a giant bill, a giant ordinance that's really a bunch of minor changes. There are some significant changes, but there aren't as many changes as it feels like when you look at the whole thing, page after page after page after page. We've broken these down. My suggestion would probably be to, and it would also help eliminate the potential for conflicts with Open Meetings Act, is to continue this one to give the board members who may want to comment on it an opportunity to comment on it. They could supply comments to staff to supply to us, or they could come and speak at the meeting too. But there's a lot of potential conflict there. I'd almost rather have it like as a memo or an email from an individual trustee of why they're in favor of something that they want to change that we haven't reviewed. And I want to make sure staff has an opportunity to review that and offer input on it, because I've reviewed a handful of the changes that were proposed, and some of them present some issues that are problematic. A basic example is I know Trustee Kozar suggested striking the text regarding, and this is not to single you out, this is just one that stands out to me, to strike text regarding the 90-day outdoor seasonal display. But that text isn't a code creating a 90-day limit. That is actually a piece of text that is allowing someone to have a seasonal display for 90 days. It's actually in a list of permitted temporary uses. Striking that in its entirety actually would make it not a permitted use anywhere.
So are we talking about 611 now?
No, I'm just making a point basic on the discussion.
Singling me out of comments?
No, I'm not singling you out. That's just one that of the list I've reviewed.
Yeah.
I'm
And
not-
that, I think, was one of the reasons the board wanted to bring those comments here tonight, was that those are major changes, and possibly you got, the commission can say, well, this is why it's there, and then make that clear, that if we do strike that, the repercussions of it.
Right, and that's what I'm getting at.
Right.
It's not whether or not that should be a 90-day limit or
Right.
not. It's that the striking of that language in its entirety is something that, if reviewed by staff in its whole, either staff or hopefully someone on this commission would pick up that it's not quite it's not quite as easy as it looked,
Right.
and some other language might
Correct,
need to be
yeah.
crafted.
Yeah, and it would have been done in
And-
an
and
open
that's-
session with residents that could comment too.
Yes, and that's admittedly tough to have on a dais when you're trying to do all the things that the village board has to do in the time that they have in their 2 or 3 meetings a month.
Yeah.
Especially with things like budget to talk about for a long time. So,
Okay. Good, well, thank you.
yeah. So, my suggestion would be to,
I have a question.
Still approve the one.
yeah, go ahead.
So the list of zoning code updates and tentative schedule, are those then subsequently noticed? And so this current one, the section 2.3 and the 2.65, that was noticed, and this is a public comment on this particular thing. And then as we go along, it's going to be noticed, each one of these sort of subsections,
Correct,
month to month to month.
correct. That's a plan. to be
That's the
very
plan, right? That's the
specific, yes.
tentative schedule. Okay,
Correct.
got it. Based on that, it seems like there's no sense in changing that. We're adding the wrinkle of the amendments to 611, filtering that in first. Next month.
For a
Is
point
that what I'm understanding?
Yeah.
Okay.
For a point of procedure, in the agenda, we are supposed to be talking about sections 2.3 and 2.65, or 2.6.5. Seems as though we've gotten really off track to the point where we're now talking about public comment on truly non-agenda items, because it's not on the agenda before us today. I would think that we can allow staff, along with Manager Keener and President Kazone and the board, to work out a schedule for the items that were kind of quasi-discussed on non-agenda items for a later date, whether that be December or elsewhere, or another time, excuse me. And I'd really like to get back to the matter at hand in discussing the petition that is before us today. That is calendared for this agenda via public notice.
I agree.
Agree.
All right. All right, so then we have this item before us, which Consuelo has described. There are no changes proposed to it. We discussed this previously. Are there any, let's see, so we had public comments. I assume there are no other public comments? All right. So do I have any questions? We can kind of combine questions and discussion on this one since we are, the village is the petitioner. Nothing?
I have none.
I have nothing.
Okay. then I would entertain a motion.
It's a long one. Make a recommendation to approve petition PZ-21-009, Village Code Amendments to Zoning Ordinance, Appendix C, Article 2, Sections 2.3, 2.6, 2.6.5. For Article 2, Section 2.3, Table 2-3, Lot and Building Regulations in R districts, adding the impervious site coverage following maximum lot coverage. It's a lot to read. I guess I'll just, oh, I got it. All right. Table 2-3, Lot and Building Regulations in R districts, maximum lot coverage, impervious site coverage percentages. Article 2, Section 2.3, Table 2-3, Lot and Building Regulations in R districts, revising maximum percentages to allow RS-10, RS-7.5, RD-7.5, and RM-9 districts, or Table 2-3, Lot and Building Regulations in R districts, changing the maximum lot coverage, or the impervious site coverage percentage, in RS-10 districts from 30 to 50%, changing the impervious site coverage percentage allowance in RS-7.5 districts from 30 to 60%, likewise changing the percentage allowance in RD-7.5 districts from 35 to 60%, and likewise allowing the impervious site coverage percentages in RM-9 districts from 40 to 50%. And Article 2, Section 2.6, Other Regulations, adding reference to 2.6.5 permitted obstructions, just to see Section 14.1.9, Table 13-1, permitted setback obstructions / encroachments.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Who's second?
Commissioner Orlowski? All right, any questions or comments on the motion? Roll call vote. Calvert?
Yes.
Hofstra?
Yes.
Case?
Yeah.
Ludke?
Yes.
Orlowski?
Yes.
Romano?
Yes.
Shalinski?
Yes.
I too vote yes. With that, the recommendation passes to the village board. You can accept, reject, or modify. All right. Other business. Any public comments on non-agenda items? Yes, you don't need to be sworn in because we're not in a public hearing, but you do need to come up and just state your name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
Donna Knoxon, I brought this to the attention of Consuela, and I don't know exactly where to start. Was at the pool this summer and talking to a girl who lived in Lombard. She had a neighbor that was renting her property on weekend basis, Airbnb. Is that a planning issue? Is it a zoning issue? Is it an ordinance issue? Where do we start to not have that in our village?
That's a good question. To not allow Airbnbs?
So we had talked about it, and she thought when, you know, the agendas lighten up, that perhaps we start entertaining looking into this. Can you touch base more on that, Consuelo? I'm not really sure how to present it.
Sure. So we briefly discussed before the meeting started, and we talked about how our current code, I believe, is silent with regard to short-term rentals. That's what Airbnb is. And
Or VRBO, same thing.
Yeah, those are similar situations where it allows for very short-term rentals. And most of the time, we're not even aware of it. But our code is silent in regards to that. It's not uncommon for codes to be silent with that. But that's something that in a future planning zoning commission meeting, we not only take a look at that, but also take a look at other items that we need to revisit, that we've talked about, in general, items that our code doesn't address, right? It could be in the zoning code, it could be in the village code. I don't know at this point where it would fit best, but I'm familiar with the zoning code more than other codes of the village code, and I don't believe we address short-term rentals.
Yeah, and I know that's one of those uses that most codes are silent on, and,
I would just hate for us to start seeing a lot of action and then we're chasing the situation of having constant transient people in residential neighborhoods.
yeah, so.
And that was the concern of my friend at the pool, that every weekend, someone else, someone was renting a bedroom or part of the house right next door. She never knew who was coming and going or what was being transpired behind closed doors.
Yeah, so, I mean, generally speaking, text amendments, we certainly can discuss them. They need to be initiated by the village board, staff via the village board. So, one thing I would say that if that's a feeling that you have, the village board would be someplace to express that concern too. It's certainly something that we could discuss and potentially hold a public hearing over if there's enough concern about that. We certainly have, as certain uses have either, begun to. There are some uses like payday loans, and then just things that kind of come up out of nowhere, weren't really a use at one point. I'm trying to remember. Well, I mean, cannabis dispensaries were the prime example. That was something we had to wrestle with as it moved
Because it
from
was
medical.
something so new.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know. I can talk at the next board meeting about it, or I can email all my trustees. But it's something that's on my radar because if it were to all of a sudden take over in Villa Park, we don't know who's staying in our neighbors' properties at all times, and you have transit property, that to me just invites nonsense.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things where.
So I'd rather get ahead of it than chasing it afterwards.
Yeah. I think that might be something worthy of conversation.
So should I start with the trustees or?
I would talk to your trustees, and, to the degree that staff can help. I'm not going to ask everybody up here for consensus on whether or not that's something to discuss,
I'm just kind of putting it on the radar.
but yeah, it's,
Because I didn't know, I talked to Consuela, I'm like, I don't know, is it a planning issue? Is it an ordinance issue? Is it a zoning issue? Because you have someone that is renting something that is not a rental property.
right. Yeah, I appreciate your concerns and for bringing that to our attention.
Okay, and I will bring it to the attention of the trustees at one of the meetings or via email.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay?
Yep,
Thanks.
thank you. Any other comments on non-agenda items? All right, seeing none. Any comments from commissioners this evening?
Nope.
None? Consuela, any new business or discussion that needs to be had?
If you could provide some guidance in terms of the text amendments, going back to, are you comfortable with the schedule has been proposed before considering new changes, or defer to the village board on that? We do have one item going to you in December. That's an application, that's a new application for rezoning to industrial, a commercial PUD to industrial. So just be on the radar for that. That will be definitely one item on the December agenda.
So that one, in addition to the one that we continue to a date certain at the following meeting?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, so two, along with tonight's, correct.
Yes, so, yeah, so I think one question that that I want to clarify is, the schedule that we have is, what did I do with it? There it is. So these are for the specific items that the village board asked to be broken up into smaller pieces. But I know typically that, some comments have arisen on some of these. And I guess my question is, does it make more sense to collect the comments on these in advance of each hearing? And then we can discuss those comments here, they go to the village board, and there's not a need for comments to come back to us when discussion inevitably ensues at the, or, potentially ensues at the board level?
I would say it's what you prefer. The goal of the schedule is really to take back what you made a recommendation to recommending approval of items you've already vetted and it's been discussed at the public meetings. For any new items, definitely require new notice, which we're doing anyway, to be more clear as to what zoning code updates we're doing. But for any changes beyond what you originally reviewed, this would be the format to discuss those before they get to the board. So the Planning and Zoning Commission is the format for discussing those new changes that have not been discussed. So that would be very helpful.
Right, so
just
I guess,
to distinct between the two.
Yeah, I guess my point is, so we're renoticing all of these. It makes sense to have any board feedback to go along with any potential additional feedback from the public on these items so that we can kind of vet those changes at once instead of simply having a hearing to vote on something that we already voted on, to go to the board to potentially have changes to come back to us for a second public hearing.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That's the best format to approach it instead of having to stew.
I mean, as far as the specific schedule, it doesn't really matter to me. We're going to hear them all. I think the one related to shipping containers and outdoor seating and that stuff, I know that's probably the most complicated in terms of like the amount of discussion likely to come about. Most of the other ones I don't see having a ton of discussion or changes. I don't know. But what I'd like to see is to get comments, whatever discussion, whatever comments we're going to get on each one at that one public hearing, hopefully wrap it up in one hearing. I mean, if we need to continue, we need to continue. But hopefully wrap it up in one hearing, pass it on to the board, and they can do with that what they decide to do with it, rather than having it sent up, get the changes, and then have the changes come back to us. To see the comments in advance.
Sure, and I would be definitely comfortable with that. Obviously, it's within your purview. If that's how you would like to, I would be supportive of that. I would, based on the comments at this meeting, I would push the shipping containers to be the next item before any of the other items.
That's fine, and I'm available to speak with you, the president, whatever trustees, as far as the schedule. But like I said, we're going to hear them all. If that's one that's, I would take them in priority as far as if that's an important one that's had a vote at the board level, which it has. Let's get that one out of the way. And then I would prioritize them based on, rather than just numerically, what you think the likely impact is on you as staff, unless obviously the village board has other guidance. Because I know some of these are somewhat pressing, and I don't want to say pressing, but like the ones related to lot coverage and the one to accessory structures. Those are things that by not passing, that the residents can't take advantage of the advantages of of those ordinances, whereas some of the other ones might not be as critical.
I've got a question, if I may.
Yes.
Consuelo, if we were to put the outdoor seating accessories or anything with regards to 611.2 or 612, prior to the deadline for publication for the December meeting, do you think that you would have the opportunity to gather all of the board comments and then have the staff comments as well for our petition packet?
We could definitely try.
Yeah, that's-
We could definitely try.
I just don't
to
want
do
to
that.
handcuff all of our village departments to have to expedite if they're not available to do so.
November and December in general are with vacations and holidays and time off, but, I would definitely commit myself to making sure that, to stay on schedule, to possibly solicit comments, additional comments, if any, from the board. We'll get forwarded to President Kazone, or the manager, first of all, and then they could forward those over to me and the commission, but to continue that conversation so that we can come back here and hopefully have the discussion needed at December meeting versus prolonging it to January.
Yeah, and personally for me, like I said, I think getting comments in writing that we can review in advance to the degree possible especially from board members, because if we have 4 or 5 board members wanting to comment potentially on some of them, that makes running the meeting somewhat complicated. And having the chance for you to review those comments is critical, because you're the one that has to implement them, and you're the one that's you and your staff are the one that are most familiar with the code, even more so than us. So I want to make sure that you're getting comments from the village board, if they have input on any of these, that you have time to review these, not to the degree possible. And I know we have discussion up here, and that's fine, but I would expect that it's in the village's best interest for the enforcer of the village code to have a chance to review the codes that are being put before us. All right. Any other questions, comments, discussion on that? Yeah.
I don't have any.
Okay. All right. Then there are no comments. I would move to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.